All right. Thank you so much. Welcome to Compassionate Accountability. And my name's Lenora Sneva, and I'm with Amber Coleman. We're going to kick you off with a quote here. Compassionate compatibility means treating people as valuable, capable, and responsible. So when I see this quote, I really think about how we need to create environments where individuals feel supported and motivated to perform their best while being held to clear standards and expectations. Amber, what are you thinking when you see this quote?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Lenora. When I read this quote too, it's about people, it's relationships, and as leaders too, recognizing that folks are not commodities. It's something that we invest in, and it's the long term. So, just a good quote all around.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk to you real quick about the agenda for the day. We're going to do a welcome and icebreaker, do some learning objectives. We're going to introduce or reintroduce to you the Plan, Do, Check, Act,
Mhm.
and then talk about compassionate accountability. What does that mean, and how does it relate to the PDCA? We're also going to talk about the Office of Financial Management, where we both work, give you an overview of that, and then bring in a case study around equity and belonging and how that lines up with compassionate accountability. And it also lines up with PDCA. We'll close you out, and then we're going to leave some time for questions and answers.
Okay, so we want to hear from you using the chat too. When we think about the word accountability, just your knee-jerk response, like what words come to mind? So I just want to give everyone a chance to kind of wrap their head around it. I know it's 10:49 on a Tuesday morning, but we know there's some folks here in the room. When you think of the term accountable, what words? Okay, punishment, trust, integrity, care, responsibility, structure. Great. Yes. Okay. Hearing some themes. That's right. So, yes, accountability helps us to meet business needs. Always, Brene Brown says, clear is kind. So, you're being clear, setting expectations, speaking to performance and outcomes. It is to build trust. That's right. Thank you all. Getting it right, transparency, self awareness. Okay. We have a lively crowd, Lenore. This is good.
Awesome.
All right. So if we were to move to the same activity, but now we're going to think about compassion. Like we think about the word compassion. What is that? Again, the knee-jerk response. Empathy. Yes, Kim. Walking the talk. Hey, love it. We're going to get to that in a minute. Kindness. Yes. Don't underestimate the value of kindness.
Mhm.
Um, I love it. Well, they're stealing from our list, which is I love it. So we're in alignment. And so empathy, kindness, care, yes. Being human-centered, where folks feel that they know that their values are heard and
Mhm.
understood. I appreciate that. So now we're gonna lump these together. So how compassion and accountability these intersect, it is by setting the expectations, but we're also modeling by being human-centered. So when you are being a compassionate leader, I feel like everybody here on this call is a leader. You are moving from those hierarchical structures and you're willing to hold yourself accountable to those same expectations. And I'm going to say it's leading in vulnerability and being willing to fail forward. So we're going to talk more about that later.
Awesome.
Lenora.
Thank you, Amber. So, oh, go ahead.
Well, I think we were talking. We want to introduce ourselves. So, my name's Amber Coleman. She, her pronouns. A brief visual description of me. I'm a multi-ethnic woman. I have long, wavy brown hair. I have brown eyes and full lips. And today I'm wearing a gift from a friend. They're tribal earrings from Yakama Nation, and I'm just really grateful to be here. Another thing about me is that I really believe in leading with curiosity, willing to interrogate systems and ask, who are we missing? Expanding beyond advocacy to reframing structures where folks can be empowered to advocate for themselves. Lenora.
Yeah, so my name's Lenora Sneva, she, her pronouns. I'm a dark-skinned woman with shoulder length, black hair with small locks. And today I'm wearing a navy blue and white striped shirt. I help people by creating spaces for people to be courageous and transparent for people to feel challenged and included to foster growth and collaboration. All right, so we're going to talk about the Plan, Do, Check, Act, which is a very popular lean tool. Give us an audience reaction if this is familiar to you,
Or an emoji in the chat works. Okay, I see some.
or whatever works. You've seen some?
Yeah,
I've got my screens up, so I can't see anything. Dang it.
I'm
All
watching.
right. Awesome. Um, so the PDCA cycle is a continuous loop of planning, doing, checking, and acting, and it provides a simple and effective approach for solving problems and I think really important managing change. When we think about process improvement, that means something's changing. And as we know, we're going to talk about this a little bit. When something changes, people get emotional. And so PDCA is also called, you might be heard it called the dimming cycle, dimming circle wheel, the Shewart cycle. There's a lot of different names for it. A little bit more information on the PDCA. Again, it maintains this continual feedback loop and it allows leaders to formulate and test process improvement ideas and changes. It's very cyclical and it became an integral part of what today is now known as lean management. It really just includes determining goals, implementing changes, evaluating those results, standardizing the thing, and then repeating that cycle over and over again. So let's hear an example. Amber, you have a gorgeous eye for interior design, and I know that you're not a big fan of tile in the kitchen or in the bathroom because it's so permanent, but you recently went through a remodel. Can you share the steps that you took that line up with the PDCA to get this beautiful kitchen going?
Thank you, Lenora. So again, type in the chat a little emoji. Any DIYers here? Do we have folks who just really love HGTV, Pinterest for just hours on end? You have vision. Okay, I'm seeing a couple of my folks here. So we are the same. Yes. And I think that's the point, right? We have a vision and it's a little bit, but how do we get there? And depending on your experience, what your vision is, it can vary. So we did a remodel. My husband is from the Coast Guard. We're no longer with the Coast Guard anymore, but this is our home when we got out, and we've done some remodeling. And as you know, sometimes you have to do it in stages. So we got to a certain place. I had a vision, but I didn't have a backsplash. And when I say I didn't have a backsplash, I mean like for like 3 years after the remodel, kind of sat there for a minute. And once I figured out what I wanted and about the price point, I realized I had a vision, but I needed my consultants. So I went to Lowe's, shout out to Lowe's, and they helped me. They had some subject matter experts, had go deep. Thank you to YouTube, watched a lot of YouTube videos
Yeah.
and shopped. And then when it was time to implement it, who's at that point though? You're at that stage, you have the vision, you have the supplies, you've got to get everything prepped, but there's a little bit of anticipation, like, okay, I'm going to do the first thing and going into the do. You just have to dive in at some point. So the first tile versus like the 60th tile, definitely grew in my own confidence and skill and be able to do that. But I will say that my little leveler became my best friend, and every single tile I checked it. I was going slow. Sometimes you have to go slow to go fast. And there I did hit a pain point right below my window. Don't look too closely. Give me all the grace, please. I hit a stopping point. I didn't have the right tools. I didn't have the right power saw. And so I called on my friend. I called a friend. I phoned a friend. And really, I phoned a friend's husband who was a neighbor and came out of the goodness of his heart in triple digit heat and came with his power tool and showed me and included me in the process. And I got through this pain point, built that skill, understood a little more experience. And then I was able to repeat the cycle to completion. So I'm a visual person. This is what I love to do. And so thank you, Lenora. When we were talking about PDCA, I had honestly just finished this project and Lenora was deep with me in it. So thank you, Lenora.
Oh, such a gorgeous kitchen. Thank you, Amber, for sharing your story. All
Thank you.
right. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Office of Financial Management. And if we could just launch that poll. So you should see a poll pop up. Go ahead and take it. Really want to understand from you, like how much do you know about OFM and do you know some of these answers? So go ahead and take the poll and then we'll close it in a minute or so. And you should see it pop up. And if you don't see it pop up, it might be
I
behind
see it. We
like
see it. I
you
see
do.
it. Yep.
I know. Sometimes people don't see it
I
though.
feel like I'm going to cheat if I answer, so I'm not going to
Yeah,
answer.
don't cheat.
Okay. Compassion,
Don't
accountability
cheat.
in real time. Just kidding.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you accountable with love. All right. And Therese or Talia, can you let me know if people are answering it? Because my thing says no one's answering it. So,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're getting
okay.
some good results
All
here.
right.
Yep.
Maybe we'll give it another 30 seconds. There's a lot of questions on there, but
Well,
you
there's
just
a
take
lot
a
of
guess.
people that were on board with the tile thing, so I'm excited, So I feel like now I have a cohort I can refer back to for further DIY projects.
Absolutely. And that is not me, but I'm here to look. Okay, let's maybe can we go ahead and close the poll? Awesome. And can everyone see the results?
I can.
Yeah, good. All right. So looks like people have heard of us, which is good, OFM. And then we were actually created in 1969. So 18% of you got it right. How many divisions? We have 12. And then how many employees? We have 525 or so.
I'm growing.
Yeah, we're growing. Okay. All right. Awesome. So we have a couple more questions for you all. So again, we provide enterprise central services and all those other areas like facilities and accounting, HR, legal and contracts, and IT. We actually have 545 employees. I don't know what that poll said. That's interesting. We actually have more. I actually helped do NEO the other day, and we had like 570. So this number keeps growing as we speak. We also have about 700 people that we serve through like the Gov's office, our
Mhm.
affiliates, Office of Independent Investigations, and that also includes like Equity Office in Results, Washington.
Mhm.
We also support 10 small agencies, commissions, boards, and we're headquartered at the Capitol campus in the insurance building, and we also have space on the fourth floor of Jefferson Building.
Right.
All right. And what's exciting about this? I mean, every agency has their vision, mission, values. We've had many iterations of that. And last year in 2023, we did a refresh and we now have the words equity in our vision statement, which is so exciting. So, really, I think when I look at that vision statement about working together for the equitable future of every Washingtonian, I think about like we're trying to be collaborative, we're trying to do
Mhm.
this together and think about everybody's needs.
Yeah.
When I think about our mission statement, it's really about the people and the budget and the policies and practices and systems. And then our value statement looks kind of the same. We added the word belonging last year, which is exciting, and also the word operational excellence, which really speaks to lean management, I think. All right. And then Amber.
Yeah. So we're going to do another poll.
Yep.
So on the scale to 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being out of the park. When you think about your own agency or your own division, where do they rate for their in terms of when you think of the term compassionate with their equity and belonging efforts? So from 1 to 5. And then you'll see the second question pop up too. So also when you think of the word accountable, how accountable do you feel like your agency or division are within their equity and belonging efforts? So go ahead and we'll give you all a minute. And we have anonymity here. So yeah, and then while folks are answering, Lenora, where do you feel like Office of Financial Management lands?
Well, I usually say like a 3.5 just for both. I know that's not an option. So I guess a three, heading toward a four. I don't think we're ever going to reach a five just because, we're just people doing people work. And so never perfect, but always just striving to be better. And I think we've come a long ways. And I think we've got another slide. The next slide is going to help us think about our equity belonging like history and
Yes,
what we've done over the last 6, 10 years
that's
in that
right.
area.
Well, I'm excited to see the results. If we can pull those up, that'd be great. Okay. So yeah, it looks like you're right, Lenora. There's the majority is in that 3 rating for at least for compassionate. Um, and for accountable, I'm seeing, 2, 3, but let's be honest, there's work to be done. I think we're seeing the whole. We have 1 to 5. So it's exciting that we have some 5s here, but we also want to be, our success is tied into others' success as well. Like we don't do this in a silo. So we're supporting each other, bringing everybody along. Okay, thank you
Yeah.
everybody for your feedback.
Mm-hmm. Susan has a great question. Who's in the fives? I want to know. Good question, Susan. All right, I'm gonna take a moment here to really explain our equity belonging efforts at OFM. And while this slide is talking about 2018 to present, it really goes before that. So I came to OFM in 2018, but before that, we were holding something called the forum, the training forum, and this was an opportunity for staff to come together in person at the Thurston County Fairgrounds to get trained or retrained in like ethics and how to communicate effectively and how to create a really good spreadsheet and how to, and then also on diversity, equity, inclusion. At the time, we had an outside facilitator that was coming in to do that work. I wasn't there, but again, this was happening before 2018. And some of the work that they were doing was harmful in the area of DEIB. And so in 2018, when we had heard about it and we were getting ready for the next one, we thought, oh, let's change it up. So we ended up contacting Dr. Terrell Ross, who at the time worked for the University of Washington doing DEIB work. And he offered to come and did a session on privilege at the training forum. And he also offered to mentor us and to help us think about a survey that we could do to really assess how the climate was within OFM regarding respect and inclusion. This has never been done before. So this is super exciting. So in 2018, at the very end of that year, we also added respect and inclusion to our values. And we also added a line about promoting a respectful, inclusive workplace to our strategic plan. So that was the first time that ever happened, which is pretty cool. We began the survey design of like, what do we really want to know from our survey? We launched the survey in early 2019. We had a celebration after we had those results to be transparent. Dr. Ross came back to kind of celebrate with us, which was great. And then we did focus groups based on how people identify. We also broke up into action committees for 90 days based on the results from the Respect and Inclusion Survey. And I'd say our response rate was pretty good. We had about, I don't know, I want to say 60% response rate, which is pretty good for a survey like that. We ran it for about 2 weeks. We also learned that for the most part, people felt like they were respected and included, but there was still, I think, I don't want to say like 20% that didn't. So that's concerning, right? Every person matters. There were some incidents of bullying harassment that people felt hadn't been handled. And so there was just things like that, that there were gaps, as there always is in any agency that we wanted to address. So we formed these action committees based on that. So we had an action committee on like training. People asked for more training. We had an action committee on forming a council. We had an action committee on creating psychologically safe places. So all of that work kind of rolled into creating a DI council. We did a very traditional way of doing a council that maybe some of you in your own agency might have already, where people could apply to be a part of the council. We had co-chair positions that were available for people to kind of apply for. And then we also started a DI foundations class. We found an outside vendor who had some material, and this was all in person. And we started those classes in the late 2019. And if we fast forward a little bit to 2021, we did another respect and inclusion survey. We were trying to do those like every other year. Results were about the same, but definitely people were like, what increased was that people felt like it was more of a respectful, inclusive workplace, which is great. But there were still some gaps. We also added DEI questions to our employee engagement survey. So that was the first time we did that. And then in 2022, we began our pro-equity, anti-racism efforts. And we have a focus on hiring, supplier diversity, and budget. All of those pair initiatives also have work groups. They were meeting on a monthly basis for about a year and a half, and now we've kind of slowed it down to quarterly because I feel like we're embedding it more into the culture of OFM.
Mhm.
I also became the equity officer in 2022. And then 2023, and again, all the while our DI council is doing their work. 2023, we did another respect and inclusion survey, which ended up being our last one. And then we also hired Amber as our pro equity consultant. We began doing some diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging coaching. We went back to our vendor facilitator that had done our DI foundations class and brought them back to do some one-on-one coaching with people that were chairs or members of the DI council. And we also did a retreat. I think, and to get to that retreat, we just noticed again there was gaps from the survey that we noted. There were questions that were answered from the employee engagement survey that we were like, oh, there's some work to do. And so we did a retreat at the end of the year to kind of bring everyone together, not just current council people, but former ones, anyone who just showed an interest, we invited. I think we even had some people from not even within OFM that came to be part of that retreat. It was in person. We had our external facilitators lead us in like a journey on like where have we been and where do we want to go and where are the gaps that we see. So we had a really good conversation together about restructuring things and really identifying gaps. And so super exciting. What came of that in the end was creating what we launched in 2024, which is something called the Equity Belonging Advisory Team, which was kind of like the council, but we restructured it. And then also we launched the forum, and the forum is an opportunity for divisions within OFM and our sister agencies to talk about their strategic plan with an equity perspective and for people to share their personal stories. And we're going to get into more detail on that. And then we also hired a language access specialist just last month, which is so exciting. So that's kind of our history in a nutshell. But I wanted to give you some good context on where we were and where we're going, and then also to note that we're not done. And I think we could come back in 4 years and
Yes.
there might be some new initiatives that we've started or stopped. So you just never know. All right. So I think the theme that came out of everything, like when we think back to like the DI retreat and then even, the coaching that we received and the results we got from the respect and inclusion surveys that we've done, we really settled on equity needs to be a shared responsibility. It cannot just be on Amber or I or the co-chairs of the council or our leaders at OFM. It needs to be embedded in all we do. And so one of the things that we wanted to really focus on and be really strategic about this, and when we made these changes, is that we wanted leaders to build their skill so that they could talk about equity and belonging within the business perspective. And that's how we kind of came with the forum, this idea of the forum. And then also for people to share their personal stories about when they felt othered or belonged, because there's something really powerful about being vulnerable with each other and sharing your story so that we can get to know you a little bit better. We also initiated this idea of like not really having chairs anymore, but just having people rotate as facilitators of those meetings. Instead of making those monthly, we change those to quarterly. And that would allow time for people to do other things like participate in other activities. So Amber, can you talk to us about that?
Yes, and we have a question in the chat too about what is a language access specialist?
Yes, go ahead.
So Laura is our new language access specialist, and one of the key duties that Laura has is to offer ASL support and interpretation within house, which is fantastic. So all of our agency-wide meetings have ASL interpretation, so we can post it internally, and then as folks need that too within our agency, we're providing that direct accommodation. So Laura is doing so much more than that, but in a nutshell, that's how, and she's new and we're so excited to have her. So yes, thank you for the question. And I would say within what Lenora is saying, it's good to hear the timeline and how this has been chunked out. And one of the things that we've recognized is sometimes as a state, and I'm going to own it as a state employee, we silo up, we do things, we create the work that's actually being done enterprise wide or in different agency. And so part of those efforts and within equity work was how do we center relationship building and de-silo our own efforts in the process and connect. And business resource groups really are the subject matter experts in the enterprise. They pull from both community and within agencies and have such a vast wealth of knowledge. And so I think that was one opportunity that we saw is how can we amplify business resource group participation within our agency, and also how do we create that as this is a guidepost, this is a touch point, like this is available not only for you leaders, but if you're new to Office of Financial Management, we want you to know on first day that this is available for you as a resource, if this is part of your lived experience or as an ally or accomplice. And so really socializing that, as they say in change management, you got to say it 7 different times, 7 different ways. So we really are trying to embed that and as a part of what we do. And so with the advisory team that we created, that is actually a qualification. If you want to be part of our equity belonging advisory team, one of the qualifications is to be a member of a business resource group with the hope that you're resource sharing, you're bringing back what you're learning, and you're also developing your own personal equity and belonging journey. So that was one aspect for business resource group participation, encouraging that. Another piece to that is we have some, subject matter experts in our agency. We have policy and communication liaisons, and sometimes it's the gift of time. Like, how do you make sure we're connecting folks? So within our quarterly meetings, one thing that we had created in our structure, and I believe it's in our charter, is having them come to quarterly meetings when needed to be sharing relevant policies with EBAT staff, so they can get some feedback, or hey, just having that open dialogue. This is what's happening in real time, this is where we're heading, we would love your input. And it creates for our leaders a very clear feedback loop. And the hope within our equity belonging advisory team is to take what was currently the DI Council and expand that to have further representation amongst all of our divisions, so that we're really creating very clear, like, it doesn't matter what division you're at OFM, the hope is that you're getting the same information, and that there's that trickle down effect. So
Awesome. Thank you, Amber.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to my tiling because I'm a visual person here. So you all saw the nice, pretty picture, but what you didn't see was like, it was like 3 weeks of just nonsense and mess and disruption, my family being uncomfortable. And I think that has to be normalized. When we talk about compassionate accountability, this is vulnerable work. This means when you're willing to model something, you're willing to be a bit messy. And from a recovering perfectionist, that's how I label myself, really being willing to recognize that it's progress, it's not perfectionism. It is really, even hearing from Lenora, one thing I appreciate is that, you have to admit what you don't know. I think as a DIYer, that's actually really important. Otherwise, you can burn the house down, both literally and proverbially. You got to know your limits. So part of that too, as a leader, is if you have a vision, I think Lenore and I want to normalize to you all. Maybe we're kind of showing you a little bit of the pretty picture, but the reality is that there's mess and change management. You know, we have some terms, people be peopling, and that's okay. That's okay. We have to normalize that part of the messiness is how we get there, and it's worth it in the end. So I kind of want to bring that back, because sometimes when you have a vision and Lenora and I, we had an idea, but we weren't completely clear. And I think sometimes that's part of just the humility aspect. Like we knew a couple things. We needed to embed equity within our infrastructure. We needed to invite leaders in to create a clear metric, a leadership metric, that this is part of the expectation. If you are a leader within OFM, this is what the metric is for you. And we wanted to give opportunity to folks who historically didn't have a voice at the table to have a chance to speak. I think one of the things that I said coming into OFM to our deputy director is, if you're only hearing from me, something's wrong. You know that this is working when you're hearing from folks you haven't heard from before. And so that is something for Lenore and I, we're really committed to expanding structures. And so we break this down with the Plan, Do, Checked, Act. And when we prioritize folks, you're willing to get a little messy with them, right? And you have to acknowledge too that as you're bringing folks along, there still might be a grieving process or even some resistance, and normalizing that. And supporting one another through that as we are bringing folks along and getting them to that vision state. So, you know, we did that with some clear things, like even collaborated through charter development, checking and following up, you know, checking back with staff to see, is the change working, and using that growth mindset again. Being flexible versus rigid, I think as state employees, you know, sometimes we just really want to get it right. It's hard too when you're like, okay, it may not be 100%, but can we get to 90? And we're going to continue to iterate. And so I think that is the success. If you look really closely at my tile, I'm probably at 90, but I'm happy with it. I'm growing. So got it. You got to take the wins. Next slide.
All right. And so I want to also just acknowledge there's some really good chatter in the
Ooh.
chat around perfection.
Oh, yeah. Tell me.
Yeah, just someone had made a really good comment, like, I'm gonna have to go back up here. What do you think about the lean philosophy of seeking perfection? Can we say that
Mm.
along the messy journey? And I think it's hard to say that it needs to be perfect, because we just can't be perfect. We're people, right? And the process is not perfect either. That's why we're trying to fix it. So, and the people are, again, we're just people, and we're kind of messy people ourselves, and we get in our feelings a lot, and we don't always do it right. So I think that's why we're trying to talk about just being compassionate along with holding people accountable,
Mhm.
at the same time, just remembering that we're all human, I think is really
Mhm.
important. It's never going to be perfect.
Thank you, Lenora. Yeah, so for this slide too, you know, really with the goal of expanding equity belonging work, where equity was not something to the side, it was integrated. Um, you know, and we're going to walk more through the programs in a minute. And we had those ideas with a bit of uncertainty, Lenore and I both did, but normalizing that change with grief and resistance, and recognizing the need to expand the reach of our equity and belonging work. One of those clear, I think looking back now, was that the DEI Council had about 15 folks. And at one of our recent forum meetings, we had around 300. We also had expanded this to beyond just OFM, our agency, but to our affiliates. So that was another piece too, is bringing folks along and expanding that. I think next slide.
All right. Here we go.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, right. So how we prioritize folks, we had to be willing to identify those gaps. I think sometimes I call it pulling back the curtain, looking at the data. sometimes it's a little bit crunchy and you have to be willing to own that as a leader. There were some themes that were rising to the top, and someone put it in chat earlier, so that was good. But OFM employees identified that leaders were talking the talk but not walking the walk. And that there was a need for DEI training and more education and inclusion around mental health, neurodiversity, accessibility, and disability. So those were some clear gaps that were identified, that we needed to make sure that we were recognizing.
Thank you,
Lenora.
Amber. All right, so we are on to do. And when I think about collaboration, this is the compassionate accountability part of doing is to be collaborative. And it's really about bringing people together. And I think we've mentioned some of this before, but we did coffee chats to share the vision. And so back in January of just this year, when we were kind of ready to launch everything, we were trying to be very strategic and not just saying, okay, tomorrow we're going to start this new thing. We wanted to give people some lead up time because people need that when change is happening, right? And so we did coffee chats with our leadership team. We did coffee chats with our supervisors. We came to those meetings and said hello, and this is what's happening. This is what's coming. We also did those with anyone that's a staff member at OFM or even our affiliate agencies. We invited them to come and just learn about this vision. Like, what's the forum and what's the equity belonging advisory? What is this all about? And why are we doing this? So we just pointed back to the data. We pointed back to, just like Amber is saying, those gaps that we had identified. We pointed back to the retreat that we had. Here's why we're making these changes, this improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And then here's when it's coming. We also made sure that we did charter creation as a work group, which is sometimes really difficult. But all the people that had come to the DI retreat, we invited them back like, hey, we're looking at the charter for the Equity Belonging Advisory Team. Did you want to come and comment or reflect on what we're putting so far? We came with something and then we had people reflect on that because sometimes it's too hard to just start raw with like 15 people. That's just too much. I think the other part I want to note is that we started these cultural humility classes. One of the things that we noted before was we had a very traditional structure of the DI Council where you just kind of applied and then you got in. But we wanted to make it we wanted to have people put a little bit more effort into their application. So we made it a requirement that you take a cultural humility class. We partnered with our outside facilitators who helped us do the original one back in 2019, the DEI Foundations class. We brought them back. They had some material already. They kind of customized it for us. And really, cultural humility is about doing some self-evaluation, some self-reflection, some self-critique, and developing your own awareness of your own culture and other people's culture. And it's really a lifelong process. We had that as a requirement. I think it's a 2-hour course spread over 2 days, something like that. We also had began to partner with Erin Jones. I know you all are familiar with her. She's absolutely amazing. And she helped strengthen the skills of our supervisors in understanding and discussing equity. So we had like 3 coaching sessions with her. We also had 3 kind of regular 2-hour sessions with her. And then we launched the forum and we launched the Equity Belonging Team work in April of this year.
So we're going to go back to check. And I told you earlier, I had my little tool, my handy dandy leveler. And I think that was important for Lenora and I too, is making sure we're getting continual feedback loops. And so a couple things were just really practical, honestly. Some things that we recognize within lessons learned was that we need to do an accessibility check on our PowerPoint that went out. We need to put a planning meeting in with the director of the division that was going to be hosting the forum and their admin to make sure they had what they needed structurally to be prepared, and asking for input and making changes as needed. Even that looked like a feedback survey that goes out after every forum. So I just want to normalize this. It can be the small things that actually are really imperative to building trust.
All right. So speaking of trust, when I think about trust, I also think about following up, especially when you're receiving feedback like a survey that, again, we've been doing surveys every other year since 2019. So following up with people saying, hey, I heard you and here's the changes that we want to make, or I heard you and can I get more information? Also being transparent and honest when you can't do the thing, when you can't follow up with it. But just being honest with people on where you are and where you want to go, I think is super important. And just bringing people along with that vision is so important, especially when you're trying to like address gaps and improve a process, which is what we were doing. So how can you keep building that trust while you're doing the thing? It's really important just to do both at the same time. So some of the things that we did was, again, really try to make sure that when other divisions were hosting their forum, which again are these monthly opportunities for OFM divisions and our affiliates to share their strategic plan that has an equity perspective, but also have people share their personal stories. So really just encouraging staff and leaders to share their stories, but also share that business perspective with the equity perspective. Also making sure that we sent out invites early and not just like right before the meeting was going to happen. So people had time to like think about it and plan, and they wouldn't have as many schedule conflicts. We also made sure that each division make sure that an accessibility check is done about a week before their presentation to make sure that those are accessible for all. And then I think another thing is just building that trust by just continually asking for feedback and then making those adjustments as needed. Amber, anything else to add there?
I think we've learned a lot through the process, and just also again normalizing some of the mess. Don't take it personally. Don't take the mess personally. I think in some of that change state, and you're going to get a lot of peopling or maybe some knee-jerk reactions, and that's okay. That's part of it. Um, but and I really appreciate you're talking about the stories. One of the things I think you and I have made sure that division directors know and coaching too is that stories are sacred. They're not owed. It is a gift when they are shared. And so I think when we talk about a leadership metric, it is we are strongly encouraging, recommending the director to share, but within their internal teams, we don't know the exact culture or their trust. So I think what has been really beautiful and surprising is folks wanting to share and what they share and giving them the freedom or liberty around like what that looks like. So even the power of having your name being pronounced the right way or normalizing mental health at the workplace. And so I have learned so much
So good.
even through the forum. I think that has been a gift. And they are sacred. Our stories are sacred to ourselves and they're not owed. So I wanted to some of those things when I say normalizing that discomfort. It is worth it though. These things are worth it. The vision, it's worth it to go through the mess.
Yeah. There's some really good stuff happening in the chat. So I wanted to make
Yay!
a comment, and I agree with what people are saying about like, Anita, I think was just saying the origins of lean are rooted in equity. And I think if you think about lean work, it's about the value that the customer holds. Like, and we have to meet that need. We have to think about the customer. And that's really important. Like when you do the Gamba, when you go out to talk to people and understand what the current state is, you're going out and talking to the customer. What do you value? What's important to you? And then you're going back and making those changes based on what the customer values, because that's what's important. And we can't forget that, because I think I know there's a lot of chatter about the perfectionism and how we can get like caught up with that. But also, again, how we need to be human centered in all the decisions that we make.
Yeah.
Really important. Okay. And I think we're almost done. I know we're just right there. So I know. So I think what's important is saying that we're not done, because we're not perfect.
You're not done.
We have a lot of work to do. We'll be gathering this at the end of this year with our equity belonging advisory team to kind of celebrate what all that we've accomplished and then start planning for 2025. And again, making those iterative changes is going to be really important. Today, we've talked about the Plan, Do, Check, Act. We've talked about compassionate accountability, which is really about building trust and prioritizing people and being collaborative and using feedback. And then we've also talked about OFM's journey on equity and belonging, and again, how we're just learning and growing, and super excited about what the future looks like.
Yes.
All right. And I mean, we've got a couple of questions for you. So I know that our time is short, but we would love to even just hear in the chat, or if anyone wants to come off mute and share like an aha moment that they've had over the last hour that we've been talking, or if they see something that they want to use in their own organization. I'm going to stop sharing my screen too, just so we can see people. But
Let me put those questions in the chat.
yeah.
And it sounds like we might get the gift of time from Teresa as being so gracious. So, and you are sharing your screen, Lenora, I can see your notes.
Oh, okay, that's good. Let me see. You don't want to see
Uh,
that.
so I don't know, because we have some questions already in the chat too. And I
Yeah,
don't know how you want to
let's do
how
that.
you want to
Let's
do
do
that.
whatever works.
Teresa or Talia, were either one of you kind of monitoring the chat? I just don't know in what order you'd like to do a round robin.
Oh, yeah. I was just kind of taking a look. I know you guys have answered some questions on the way. Let's see. There was one from Jerry a little while ago when we were kind of talking about just embracing the messy. I think of messy and lean in regards to reporting. How can messy be valued in reporting?
How can messy be what? What was the question? I'm sorry.
Valued in
Oh
reporting.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's such a good question. I mean, I think we've been kind of saying it already, is that we cannot value perfection, and we have to, I think Amber even said it earlier about like making it okay to, number one, be emotional about the change in the process, and then also being okay with like messing it up a little bit, right? And being okay with like not doing it perfect, and it's okay to fail because that means we're just learning and growing and not penalizing people for yeah, so I think hopefully that kind of answered that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was just one other question, and then I'll hand you the mic to highlight those aha moments. But Jeremy was wondering, how do you differentiate between performative and performance?
Ooh.
Oftentimes, part of the mess is supporting people growing, and we're all at different places in our DEIB journeys. How much has improved at OFM since 2018, speaking about performance metrics in your surveys?
Wow, what a great question. Amber, do you want to jump in on that one?
I mean, my brain keyed in the word performative too.
Mhm.
I was really clear with Lenora when I joined OFM. I said, I'm not the heart police. Like, I'm not here to always interrogate people's intent. Like, I think when I think of equity work, how do we embed that into infrastructures that's going to outlast any one of us? And so I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question too around, I don't know if you feel comfortable coming off mute.
Yeah, I can come off mute.
Perfect.
So my question was in regards to oftentimes we start hearing people say equity more, for example, or we hear people say diversity more, but then we're not really
Mm.
seeing that. We're not seeing that respect. We're not seeing that inclusion. We're not seeing that shared power, right? And so I was curious because I'm a data person, what your surveys were telling you if you've seen improvement in terms of that measurable difference. And obviously, qualitative data is data as well. As you said, it's sacred. So definitely appreciate that as well. But I was just curious about, since you've been measuring this since 2018, if you've seen improvements in internally saying, yeah, this is a safer place to work.
Mm.
People of color, for example, feel like they're more included and valued at OFM, right? I wanted to just see like if that was true, and also seeing if you've done any kind of comparison with your diversity workforce data. If you know, sometimes it's environmental change through change in the workforce as well. So that's kind of where it was, as opposed to like, oh, now we have equity, or we're saying equity more, which
Yes.
may not necessarily translate into a difference in culture.
Oh my
Such
gosh.
a good one. Yeah.
You want to go first? I have a thought, but you go first, Lenore.
Yeah, I would say just regarding like the data over the years. Again, we've done the survey 3 times now, and now we've decided just to take those questions and embed them into um, our employee engagement survey. But I would say that we have made significant improvement in like people feeling like it's definitely remained steady and slightly increased every year. Every time we ask, like, do you feel respected, included at OFM? Yes, that number has increased. And then I think the other question that we asked, I didn't talk about as much, was who's missing? We've been asking that question. We've asked it 3 times now over the last 6 years, and that's changed. And that's good, right? So the first time we asked it, it was like people of color. Like that was like the number one. And then the second number one, which is very telling, was no one. And we are like, oh, we have a problem. We were smaller then, we weren't as diverse as we are now. And so when we first got those results, I was like, oh no, we have a problem. Um, and now when we ask that question, again, we just ran the survey last year in 2023. We asked that same question, who's missing? It's people with like neurodiverse. And that's I'm kind of theming it out a little bit, but that's kind of what people were saying. We have more people of color at OFM, period. And another one that people were saying back in the day was we need to see more people of color in leadership. Well, we did that too. So now when we look at our leadership team and even I think we can do a little bit better on our supervisors, but our top leadership team is actually all female, but there's one male, which is complete opposite of what it was back in 2018. And we just have lots of women of color on our leadership team, which is amazing. So we've made those workforce changes. You can see them and we've made strides, but we again, like we said, we still have a long way to go. And I think another area that we need to focus on now is getting our supervisor level to be more diverse. And then Amber, go ahead.
Jeremy, it's good to see you. I recognize you, but I will say that one of the questions I've been asking myself is we have right now we have our pro-equity anti-racist initiatives, and one of those was hiring. And so some of the things that I think Lenora and I like we talk about is yes, hiring, right? What are our initiatives? What are we doing? But what are we hiring into? What's the culture and climate? What's our retention?
Mhm.
What are our exit
Mhm.
interviews saying? Oh, yes, other people, yes. So I think that's a vulnerable question. And depending on what agency you're at, where exit interviews go, but I just think that is also key because having that's complicated, right? And problematic if we're hiring just for diversity, but what culture are we inviting these folks into? And where's the leadership look like? How, like to Lenora's point, what is the leadership reflecting? I think that's another key. We just have to we had to speak to the elephant in the room.
Mhm. And I think I'll just jump in again just to say I think that was one of the reasons why we thought it was so important to bring Erin Jones in, because she's so strong in that area and she had such good information to help leaders build that skill in understanding how to talk about equity and belonging at work. Because that's what's going to keep your employee is when your leaders understand it and respect it and can speak about it and they don't. And of course, it's going to be uncomfortable if you've never talked about it, but we want to try to build the skill. So when we have our expanded leadership team meetings, which is our supervisor meetings that are quarterly, we always want to try to touch on equity, belonging, and keep sharpening that skill in that area.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Anita's hands up. Anita.
Hi. Okay,
Hey.
so literally one of my favorite people on the whole planet, Amber.
Amber.
Love your face, love seeing your face. But y'all got me hot. I'm gonna be honest. I'm feeling my heart's pounding a little bit. So I'm gonna be vulnerable and
Yeah.
probably get attacked in the chat, but it's all right. So, lean methodology doesn't seek to make people perfect. That is not the goal. It seeks to make client experiences perfect, right? Lean assumes that people will be imperfect and wants to create safe spaces for imperfect people to be vulnerable and share the imperfections so we can make things better.
Okay.
So this idea that perfection is not the goal, that's not lean. Lean assumes people will be imperfect, and that's okay. That's great. We want that. We want you to bring that forward. We want to create these safe spaces. And that's why I say lean is rooted in equity, because it's about bringing all of the impacted voices to the table. And yes,
Absolutely.
seeking out what's missing. I love that you're like, this is one of the questions that you're asking. Who's not here?
Yeah.
Why is that important? Because we want to welcome all the voices to the table and make sure that all of the voices are being heard equally, and that we're bringing justice into the conversation as well, right? Justice for all people. Anyway, so thank you for letting me say that, because I was
Yeah.
like, oh no, please don't make perfection a dirty word. That's what we're seeking for our client experiences. And it, for us, our clients, they need that. Like, we are doing critical work, life changing, life affirming, sometimes life saving work. And
Right.
so it is critical for us to be seeking perfection.
I
So-
think, Anita, thank you for that. And what I don't want us to do is get caught up on semantics though, right? So I hear what you're saying. And I also know that in some circles, saying the word perfection, we have also associated that with like white dominant culture. And so sometimes it doesn't leave a good taste in people's mouths. So, but I don't want to, but I hear what you're saying though, and I appreciate it. So I think depending on your audience, you use that word as you so fit. But I agree with what you're saying. Lean is about equity. It's about what the customer values, period. It's about like, hey, we need to fix this thing. Let's talk to all the people that are impacted by it and see how it's affecting them, and then see how we can make improvements.
And what a beautiful bridge, because I think I saw someone had to leave from Office of Equity. I know we're out of time, but to bridge equity to lean and how we do business, please and thank you. It has to outlive any one of us. And so where we can embed this in the infrastructure, and we have some beautiful minds here in the room that maybe this is going to start sparking some conversation. Lenora and I are here. However we can help support, reach out to us. We would love to make time for you all. So I just appreciate everyone on this call. Anita, just so good to see you always. But I think we have to give this back to Teresa and Talia. We've taken some time.
No, quite all right. Such a great conversation. We totally welcome that. And just to circle back to just those questions that Amber was asking, if anybody would love to share, their aha moments through today's presentation, any next steps that you gathered that you could take with you, and how you can use this methodology within your agency or organization or even unit. We'd love to hear from you. So if anybody wants to raise your hand, come off mute, enter in the chat, we'd love to hear. What is your aha moment today?
My aha moment is realize that I have government in my title from a previous work group. So I apologize for that.
Oh, it's awkward.
Official. Anita, do you want to share your aha moment? Or is that your hand from earlier?
Maybe
I think it might be from last time.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is Janae, and I work for the Department of Health. And just listening to you all talk about perfection, as a woman of color and of a certain age, things change and evolution happens. And so for, perfection to be a lean goal, where were we in time when that was the case? Who wasn't being left out? What systematic structural frame of mind was the country in? And we can't be afraid to have to revise what we thought before. I'm of an age where people say, well, it was always done that way. That's why we do it. And I just want to put it out there that just because we always did it that way, or just because that's how it started, that doesn't mean that that's how it ends.
Mhm.
Thank you for letting me share.
That's good. That's really good.
Love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Any other aha moments or any takeaways from today that folks want to share?
I'll just jump in real quick and just say that when I think about lean work, I think I had some aha moments when I learned about organization change management years ago. And I realized that the lean work that I was doing back at DSHS and ESD um, wasn't human centered sometimes. And I would get in these holes when I would be doing like a value stream mapping event, and people would come into the room angry and resistant. And it was because I hadn't done a good job, or the team, wherever I was working with, we hadn't done a good job of going out and talking to people before we brought them to the room. And that's where I think it's important that we use compassion and accountability and remember that these are people, and people have feelings and emotions, and they're often very tied very closely to their work and their job. And when you start messing with that process, they get super emotional and angry sometimes. And sometimes they're relieved. So they're like, oh my gosh, finally someone's going to deal with this, right? And then sometimes we're like, no, don't touch it. Don't do it. Don't do anything, right? But I think I didn't understand that back in the day. I understand it more now. And so I think it's really important that we as lean practitioners take the time to not rush into process improvement without involving the people that are most impacted by it. We have to take the time to like respect them and value them and talk to them and bring them along so that when we get them in the room to look at the current state and to create a future state, that there's more buy-in and commitment because we took the time to listen to them vent and we took the time to hear what that process looked like. We valued them as people. I think that's just my point. It's like we've got to marry OCM and lean together. We've got to remember um, to just value people for who they are and what they bring.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Ashton in the chat, just so you saw, appreciate the discussion on normalizing the grief and discomfort and learning and changing. It's a great reminder for everybody. Honestly, I think my aha moment from today was just the fact that, change is such vulnerable work, and being reminded of that. And it also often can be messy work, but being willing to try things and be okay with maybe it not working out and taking another course. And also being okay, like Amber and Lenora said, it's okay with not knowing, but just being honest and transparent on the direction. And we learned this didn't work. We're gonna try this, and I think that's just so important. So it's just such a great reminder all around today. So appreciate you both so much.
Thank you so much, and don't hesitate to phone a friend.
Yeah.
And it could be sometimes you need someone with power tools you don't have.
Yeah.
So Lenora and I are happy to help support the folks here in this room.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes, feel free to reach out to Lenora and Amber if you do have any questions. If you do kind of have that aha moment as it comes to you later, often comes to me when it's, totally not work related event and I'm not doing something and something comes. So absolutely feel free to reach out to them. Appreciate you both so much for your time and your energy, and just for just sharing how much you were able to accomplish there at OFM and just change the culture there. So appreciate you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.